Amy, thank you. It's always wonderful to be here. I love coming to Montgomery, or Montgomery, as I was always told to say it. They're going to be passing out some books. You can't keep them. This is an amazing educational tool, and the reason why we're passing out these books is because the music I am going to play for you today, you can follow along. Some of these songs were recorded in the 20s and some of them were recorded in the 50s, but I think it's a lot easier for you if you have something in your hand. You'll probably have to share it, but you can follow along in the book because, again, it's kind of hard to understand it. So I just went ahead and brought a bunch of the books, and make sure you get a copy and you share it with the person next to you. I think I brought like 25 books so you can share them. And once we get that underway, I'll go ahead and get started. This book, by the way, was thanks to a grant from the Alabama Humanities Foundation. This is why we have this book. I came to Sloss Furnaces in 2002, and I found all these books. And I asked the Middle Arts director, because I saw her name in here, Paige Wainwright. I said, this is an awesome book. It's got this CD. It's this amazing music. And she said, I know we've just kind of shelved it for a while. Well, I brought it all back. And the editor of this book was Joey Brackner, who is, of course, I have a cheat sheet here because I have to thank these people because I've done this presentation all over the country, and I cannot begin to tell you the response of this kind of music. But Joey Brackner, of course, is the director of the Alabama Center for Traditional Culture. He's the editor of this book. But it's also Maggie Holtzberg, it's Joyce Cawthon. These are names that we're familiar with. Alabama Folklife Association in Alabama, if you don't know, is one of the best in the country. So that's just little kudos to the people responsible for the book. Okay, so I'm really very happy to be able to share this with you today. And I'd like to start off by telling you about this guy, because this guy is really the inspiration for the book. And his name is Dr. Archie Green. Dr. Archie Green he passed away a couple of years ago. He was a very famous historian of what is referred to as labor law. Dr. Green was very much interested in documenting the lives of working people. And he was very well known. As it says, he is credited with winning congressional support for passage of the American Folklife Preservation Act and the Folklife Center at the Library of Congress. So again, what he decided and how all this got connected to Sloss Furnaces, again, I am the curator of Sloss Furnaces, and how this all has to do with Sloss is the fact that Dr. Archie Green decided to visit Sloss Furnaces in 1986. And if you don't know, Sloss Furnaces is the only 20th century blast furnace in the United States that is currently being interpreted and preserved as an industrial museum. There are no others. It pretty much is it. There's bits and pieces of Bethlehem Steel and other places, but for the most part, Sloss Furnaces is it. And it's an awesome place if you have not been there. So Dr. Archie Green decides to visit Sloss Furnaces. And while he's walking around this maze of pipes and these beautiful stoves and furnaces and ladle cars and smokestacks, he starts to think about the men, who came to Birmingham. Birmingham Incorporated in 1871, city of the New South. People came from all over the country to work in one of the mines, mills, or blast furnaces. And he realized that when they came to Birmingham, they didn't just come and set up shop all over again. They brought their traditions with them. They brought their customs with them. I've interviewed African American women whose families came up from the Black Belt, and when they came, they brought the seeds of their plants, and they transplanted all this stuff. Well, of course, they also brought their music. And he decided to get with the group of individuals that I've already talked about, like Maggie and Joey, and he got with the Alabama Folklife Center, and he said, I realized all these people came pouring in. And work was so important. Music was not only important to an entertainment factor, but music was also important to a lot of these individuals when they worked. So this is what I'm going to play for you today. And a lot of these people, most of the individuals that came to Sloss Furnaces came from the Black Belt area. And another thing I guess I should tell you about Sloss Furnaces is what we did there. Okay, from 1882 until 1970, we produced these big giant bars of pig iron. We didn't do anything with it. We just sold it to foundries all over the world, and they would melt it down, and they would make everything from cookware to car parts to cast iron pipe. And again, we did this until 1970, just in case you weren't aware of what was produced there. Okay, so most of the people pouring in to the Birmingham area, they're going to come from really all walks of life. They're going to come from the Appalachian mountain towns of Tennessee, Kentucky. But again, most of them are going to come from the Black Belt area of Alabama. They were sharecroppers making next to nothing, and they were not only wanting to make more money by working on one of the railroads or working in the mines or the blast furnaces, but they wanted to bring their families. They wanted to get out of this desperate rural poverty that they had been living in for years. But one thing that they didn't leave behind were their traditions, or I guess you could say kind of their country airs. And so this book is a wonderful education tool. I love doing it for teachers because not every child, gets the concept of standing up there and hearing about history, but if you're playing music, it's just another way to teach history. In fact, Archie Green, after the book finally got produced, he said, "We offer Spirit of Steel as a tribute to generations who labored to produce a nation's wealth." It's all centered around this Industrial Revolution. "And to the grandchildren of factory hands, perhaps Spirit of Steel will help them understand something of their own past, the endless toil and eternal hope." So again, this is why I resurrected this book. I just thought it was absolutely fabulous. Okay, the first type of music I'm going to play for you today is called Gandy music. And Gandy Dancers were really all over the country. But as it says, Gandy Dancers, they sang railroad songs, and most of the ones I want to concentrate, it says it may be that Southern African Americans, let me look at this, it may be that Southern African American Gandy Dancers with a long tradition of using song to coordinate work were unique in their use of task-related work chants. So what these people did, these crews, well, in the old days, you had, these people were the caretakers of the railroads, okay? So you had section crews that would have been responsible for like 10 miles of railroad track. So they were responsible of cleaning the track of debris, but they were also, the hardest job was straightening the track. And they took these 20-pound, 5-foot-long lining bars, and they would clip it to the track and they would pull. But what's the key here? It had to be synchronized. And so to keep everybody, synchronized, there would be a caller and they would sing. And the songs could pertain to anything: religion, politics, women. Some of the Gandy Dancers wouldn't let some of the songs be, I don't even want to know. But politics, their bosses. So what I'm going to play for you today is the first Gandy dancing song and it's kind of like a poem. And you can hear when they say hey and ho, it's on page, the story about him is on page 4, but turn to page 55 because this song was recorded in 1927. And if you're looking at the words, it might help you just a little bit. But this was recorded in 1927 by the TCI section crew. And it's called the track lining song. And listen to it because you can kind of hear when they're getting ready, to realign the track. Let me get all this set here. It's called the track lining.
All right, boys, let's go back. The whistle is going. I hear the captain calling. Let's go back. Party, let's go.
On the water. Hey. But you get the idea when they're lining. Now, the reason why they did this, just like slaves would have done in the fields, to make the job less tedious, to get their minds off of, you know, how bad their backs hurt. But there was always a caller, and they, again, you know, they would sing about absolutely anything and everything. Now, when they started to put this together, I just lost my book down here somewhere. No, sorry. Technical problems. Okay, when they started to put this book together, Maggie Holtzberg decided that she was going to do a documentary on these men. And they got a group together. But as you can tell, I don't expect you, I teach at UAB, and I just taught this course on industry. And so I added this, so that's why it has so much text. I certainly don't expect you to read all of it. But this is just a quote from her. And when she wanted to do this Gandy documentary, everybody told her, well, these men have all passed away. But she found, it said, you know, I would need to contact a medium. But she found a bunch of guys that, and they, you know, and they said, hey, we're still here. And so they were around the Bessemer area and the Brighton area. And so they got together and they went to one of the homes of one of these men. I think it was John Mealing's. And they had all the cameras set up and they said, okay, you know, guys, start, you know, singing these songs. Well, they all looked at each other and they couldn't do it. And here Maggie has got this crew and she's like, oh, this is just perfect. So she finally figures out, what's the problem? The place is all wrong. So they take him out to an actual railroad site and it came back just like that. So now, when I was doing this presentation a couple weeks ago, I think it was this one, but there was a woman in the audience, and she said, I noticed in this book there's a song by John Mealing. Now, John Mealing, and she happened to know him, and she said, you know, could you play this? And I decided to add it. He was a Gandy dancer, but he did his own unique performances, and he has performed in Carnegie Hall. He has performed everywhere. And so the song I'm going to play for you, it's on page 52. And what I find amazing, and when you listen to this, you know, anybody can kind of sound good today if you're in a big recording studio. This guy is just going to sit down and do one of these songs, and he's going to do the ham bone where you slap your knee and all this. And again, he doesn't have anything but his voice, and it's pretty amazing. And again, it is on page 52. Page 52.
This here is what I said coming up during the pressure.
He's talking about, and again, stories.
I got holes in my pocket and patches on my pants. I'm behind in my house rent and they want it in advance. And I ain't got nothing. I ain't got no money and I can't pay. Grounds in my coffin, boll weevils in my meal, tacks in my shoes, and you're sticking all in my heel. And I'm got limp. Yes, I got the limp. I can't hardly walk. Down behind the hen house on my knees, thought I heard a chicken sneeze. Just all the rooster was saying his prayers, giving out hymn to the hens upstairs. Such a singing. The hen go to clucking, and the rooster going to crowing. Just getting by, so easy. Oh, ain't no need to be working so hard. Now I got a gal in a white folk yard. Kill the chicken, she saved me feet. Think I'm working just loading the street, having a good time. Sliding by, getting by so easy. and I can't hardly make it. Well, ain't no need of me working so hard. I got a gal in the white folks' yard. Kill the chicken, she saved me his head. Stick on waking him at home in the bed, just sleeping, dreaming about her, getting by, and so easy. Well, ain't no need of me working so hard. And I got a gal in the white folks' yard. Kill the chicken, she saved me his feet. Stick 'em, wake 'em, just loafing the street, having a good time, getting by so easy. Well, standing on the corner, standing like a man, standing on the corner with a bucket in my hand, waiting on the sop at the white folk paint. That bread, it's so good, getting it easy, and I'm sliding up.
Again, he's amazing. And I just had never used it until this woman said, you've got to, I knew John and he would love it if you added him. And I'm like, it's the best thing I've added to this. But it tells you, he's telling you a story about, this is the Depression and this is how times were rough. And, women are always put in there. And it's just, you get an idea of what perhaps life was like for him. But just an amazing individual. Now, the next kind of music I want to look at is gospel music. And this is a style of music that Birmingham is known for. There were, in the 30s and 40s, there's still gospel quartets, but there were more gospel quartets that you could find in Birmingham and Bessemer than any other place in the United States. And most of these individuals, of course, sang about labor and sang religious songs. When you think of the gospel quartets, you think of religious songs, but they also sang about labor, and they also sang about the union movement. And the song I'm going to play for you is called "The Spirit of Still Murri," and it's played, and the guys that sing it are the CIO singers. And when they retired from U.S. Steel, they became the Sterling Jubilee Singers, and they were around for a very long time. And the reason why they wrote this song for Phil Murri was the president of the CIO. And when he passed away, in homage to him, they wrote this song because he was a president that demanded that this union be integrated, that these meetings be integrated. And so they had a reverence for him. But again, I love this quote. It says they came from the coal mines and steel mills of Alabama, raising their voices to the sky. They sang hymns and spirituals with vivid and complex harmonies, attacking the tunes like the devil himself. And again, I think, if you're familiar with this type of music, you also had, even today, you've got the Blind Boys of Alabama. This is a tradition that is still around today. And if you're interested in this, the Jefferson County Sound, this is a wonderful documentary of this music. But this particular, you can find it. It's on page 76. And it's called "The Spirit of Phil Murri." This was recorded in 1952, and again, it sounds just like this religious song, but it's all about just homage to this man that did a lot for the African American workers in the steel mills.
Let Phil Murri live on and on. Just let his spirit, let the spirit Phil Murri live on and on. God has called Mr. Murri. Exactly what to do. Mr. Murri smiles, said, I'll be your friend. I'll fight for the right of the working men. When I die, I want to be straight where I can in them.
Okay, that's not good.
Every working man. Every working man.
We have had a little bit of trouble all day, but keep going. Okay. Well, you get the idea. Okay. Unfortunately, we've had a little bit of technical difficulty today, but hopefully the rest of the songs will work. But you get the idea. It's this wonderful gospel sound, but these individuals, were speaking, paying homage to this individual. And there were all kinds of unions events, and they would perform at union events all over Alabama. And they were the CIO singers, and they sang wherever they were needed. Now, the next kind of music, I love this kind of music. This is fiddle music, and it really appeared to be the most popular form of music among the immigrants that are going to be pouring in from the Appalachian areas of the United States. And probably the best known fiddle player in Alabama was somebody who had nothing to do with the mining industry, but it's the miners that just loved this music. And his name was Charlie Stripling. And Charlie Stripling was a West Alabama cotton farmer, and Stripling came of age as a fiddle player at a time when this music was really popular in the 20s and 30s. And realizing the popularity of this music, you had all these recording companies coming down in the 30s and 20s, 30s, and 40s, and they would set up these makeshift studios, and they would set them up in hotel lobbies or car parking lots, and they would record individuals. And in 1928, one of these recording companies came to Birmingham, and they discovered Charlie Stripling. And he was playing on local radio shows with his brother, and he ended up recording for years. But what I like about this individual, and I'm going to go back to this slide, is that he recorded on local radio stations, or played on local radio stations in the Birmingham area. And these were radio stations that were listened to by hundreds of miners who lived out in these tiny towns away from everything. And their only access to the outside world for news and entertainment was the radio. I mean, they depended on, the radio for everything. And at least once a week, one of the families would host a dance. And, if you hosted a dance at your house, that simply meant everybody brought the food, and you would shove all your furniture to the side of the room, and you would dance. And they loved Charlie Stripling. And one of the songs that, when I was doing some research, that I found out that they really liked was a song, and it's on page 19, the information is on page 19. And it is a song called Coal Mining Blues. And it was recorded in 1928 by Charlie Stripling. This isn't one of your typical upbeat songs. It's kind of, it's got a very sad melody. And it's almost like it's speaking to maybe their experiences in the mine. But it's called Coal Mining Blues. And hopefully this one will work. And you can almost imagine them doing a slow two-step. Picture speaks absolute volumes to, what exactly I'm talking about. We're all familiar with, we've heard about all these Alabama mines, Winona, Bessie, Colbert. They were everywhere throughout the north central Alabama area. Again, Charlie Stripling. The next type of music I want to look at is music that most people really aren't familiar with. These are ballads, and by the 1920s, ballads were becoming very popular with the working class, and because they told a story. And ballads not only spoke to the hardships that were endured by workers, but to complaints and to problems. A ballad is kind of getting the word out, you know, pouring your heart out and letting others know. And probably the best ballad, or the best well-known ballad of the working class, is one called the Ballad of John Catchings. And it says, "Come gather round and I will sing a song you know is true about a brother working man, a man that's union through and through." Well, what happens here, these ballads are going to become very popular with workers at Republic Steel and other steel mills and blast furnaces and mines throughout the Birmingham area. But these ballads are going to become very unpopular with the hierarchy that did not want unions to come in, because these workers would write these ballads to promote the need to unionize. And nobody was supporting the unions in the South. The only group was a group called the National Committee for the Defense of Political Prisoners, which was a part of the Communist Party. The American Communist Party was not a big deal in the 20s and 30s, you know, when later on in the 50s and 60s when you said communism. But the only group that ever came down here to help black sharecroppers and white sharecroppers and the Scottsboro Boys was the American Communist Party. And so what happens here, you have got a man by the name of John Catchings. John Catchings worked for Thomas Furnace, which was owned by Republic Steel. And he decided to try to unionize because the rent was always going up on the houses. They were not getting paid a decent wage. And he was always getting thrown in jail for attempting to unionize. So the representative for the National Committee for the blah, 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 was a man by the name of Joe Gelder. And Joe Gelder was from a very prominent Jewish family in Birmingham, Alabama. He had been born and raised in Birmingham, and he got involved in the rights of black and white workers, whether they be sharecroppers or whatever. And so he ended up going to New York for further training, and they ended up sending him back because John Catchings was always getting thrown into jail. And he really had a good point. He was starting to get men together to unionize. And so when Joe Gelder came down here, he decided to, the last time Catchings gets thrown in jail, he comes down, and he truly believes we've got to get away. And he brought his wife, Esther, who was actually from the Montgomery area, and he brought Esther with him and his daughter, Ruth, and they settled in Birmingham, and they had to figure out a way to draw attention to what was happening at Thomas Furnace, and so they decided to write a ballad. And so I'm going to play for you, and it is written by, it's on page 27. It's called The Ballad of John Catching. It's recorded. Now, they don't have the best voices. Oh, and I want to tell you this one quote I like. It says, years later, Gelder's daughter Ruth was asked, you know, how this ballad that became so famous was written. And she said, well, Dad, Mother, and the local Communist Party organizer sat around one night over a bottle of bourbon and wrote it. So, you know, there, I guess Hemingway did know something. So this is, again, you know, this is the company towns. This is this constant need to want to try and unionize. And yes, there were unions in Birmingham, and they were successful, but there were a lot of strikes and a lot of problems at certain times. So again, I'm going to play this for you. Oh, by the way, it's recorded by Alan Lomax. And you really can't get any bigger than Alan Lomax. He was not only a collector of folk music, but he realized how important it was to go around the country and record. His dad was taught at the University of Texas, and he came out of the University of Texas. And he recorded thousands and thousands of songs and interviews of workers. And again, all of this is documented at the Alabama Folklife Center. I mean, he is really the original oral historian. So he is going to be the one recording this. Now, this was recorded in 1937, and it goes on and on and on. They must have had the bourbon when they were recording it. But let's see. Hopefully we'll have to look at this one.
Was that Thomas Furnace in that previous picture?
No. It was actually, I think, Woodward.
A song you know is true.
You kind of have to follow it on this.
The working man, a man that's union through and through. John Catkins is a union man. He joined on Charter Day. He did not like the company's town, where they used crackers instead of pay. The furnace where he made his dime is Thomas Mill in Birmingham. Republic Steel, they own that plant, and they're the toughest in the land.
Look, the owners of Thomas Furnace, the Republic Steel, were furious about this. This went all over the country.
John Catkins said, our time has come. We'll organize this very day. And then they had election day to vote the union straight. And when the votes were counted up, Republic got a measly 8. Those rich men.
Well, for lack of time, you get the picture here. Now, if you look on page 34, there should have been a ballad written about Joe Gelder, because when he came down and the Republic Steel, well, they call them thugs, for lack of a better word in the book, when they found out what he was doing, they cornered him one night and they beat him. And I mean, they beat him severely. And he lived another 20 years, and when he died of a heart attack, but it was all caused by these, they literally stomped and broke all his ribs. So, you know, having a position like this was certainly not easy. So again, just the folk music is just the ballads, which are part of the folk music. Again, the Alabama Folklife Association, if you're interested, has all types of these types of songs, but this was actually the most popular. Okay, I'm going to kind of change course here just a little bit. The last three songs, and I have like 8 minutes that I'm going to play, they don't really apply to unions, but they apply to or pertain to what hundreds of thousands of African Americans were experiencing in the 1930s, 20s, and 40s, and that is this legalized segregation, these Jim Crow laws. And one of the songs I want to play for you, and it is on 61, page 61, is a song by Cow Davenport. Cow Davenport and was actually an outstanding piano player. He came from Anniston, Alabama, and he moved to Birmingham in 1915. And he gets tired of all the discrimination, so he decides to go to Atlanta, where he performed a lot, but then he didn't like that, so he went to Cleveland and then Chicago. And as the slide says, he became rather well known, and his parents wanted him to be a preacher, so they sent him to a theology seminary, and he got kicked out because there was a piano in the church, and he would go play ragtime all the time, so they kicked him out. But the sad part, while relatively young, he suffers a debilitating stroke, and he falls kind of off the earth for a while. Nobody knows what happens to him, but he's rediscovered. He's washing dishes, and another musician helps him kind of get back, and he will perform a little bit after then. But again, this song I want to play for you very quickly is called the Jim Crow Blues. And, it's just a little bit, speaking of what I want to get away from and what I'm going to. And this is 1927. This is him, by the way. And for you young people, BVDs, I think, is long underwear, if I remember my dad. Okay, I'm going to end with, but again, just a wonderful, just sitting down and getting recorded and playing this. I'm going to end with two women. In the 1920s and 30s, you're going to have the classical blues that becomes very, very popular. And Black Swan Records was a black label. And they at first were only recording like Lena Horne and these more sophisticated individuals. But the music that everybody really liked were these women like Bessie Smith, and they were all named Smith. Not their original names, but Bessie Smith, Trixie Smith, let's see, they're all up there, Mamie Smith, and they were part of the Chitlin circuit. And they traveled all over the country, and they played with all the great names. And Trixie Smith is the only one that really kind of has ties to Alabama. And let's see, it's on page 41, I believe. I'm trying to make sure you guys follow along. So she has ties to Alabama, but she's also part of this music group that includes Fletcher Henderson, Charlie Brown. These are huge names. And Louis Armstrong. So I believe, let's see, is it 41, guys? Okay. Well, you can read there. It says, set in Birmingham. This is recorded in Birmingham, set in Birmingham, recorded in New York. She was accompanied by Charlie Green on trombone, Buster Bailey, clarinet, Fletcher Henderson. If you're familiar with this, type of jazz, these are huge names. And so I picked this song because it talks about a mine explosion. Okay. I know, I only have one more song. I got to end on a really good song. It just sounds like Betty Boop a little bit.
Once I had a daddy, and he went down in a hole. Once I had a daddy.
Listen to the instrumental parts of it. Charlie Green. Again, just, for 1927, not too bad. Last song, real quick, I have to end with Murli. This is my favorite song. I like it. She was a really, really popular. Again, it's on page 43, and we'll end with this. She sang, and it says here, this was recorded in 1937 in Chicago, and she was known as singing very suggestive songs, and this one became really popular. It says it's mostly notable for its popularity and more positive and prosperous portrayal of an Alabama miner. And it has absolutely no connection to Alabama except for the name. But I just absolutely love her voice. And then we'll end it on this one. Got a man in the Bama mines.
You can leave me if you want to. I'm giving you a break. But don't come back home crying over your mistake. I've got a man in the Bama mine.
Oh, boo.
I can spend his dollar like I can his dime. Keep his business straight. I've got a man in the Bama mine. I can spend his dollar like I can his dime. I've got the man in the mine stand right up for me.
Okay, great way to end it, isn't it? So, well, I've tried to play you a variety of music, and I think, when you leave here today, it's just really to truly understand the traditions and the many groups that came into the Birmingham area. It's very important to also look at, what they brought with them, and especially this music. So thank you very much.
All right, we have a little bit of time for some questions. If you will, please raise your hand, and either myself or Georgia Ann will pass you the microphone. Make sure you speak into the microphone so everyone can hear, please. Thank you. Anybody have any questions for Ms. Oots?
Oh.
What's a union?
A union? Oh, okay. Well, if you're a worker, and let's say there are a bunch of men working at Sloss Furnaces, and all of a sudden they're asking me to work a lot longer hours than I'm supposed to, and I'm not getting paid very much, and I go to somebody and I try to tell them something, and they're not listening, so I get all my people together and form an organization because there's strength in numbers, and you get organized and you demand rights, and then you meet, and then hopefully if 100 men all want the same thing, then your boss will approve it. So that's kind of how that is a terrible definition, but it kind of gives you a little bit of an idea.
I have a question over here.
I think they had several people got killed, or maybe they rescued them down in an Alabama mine just a few years ago. I think they mentioned it was the deepest
Yes,
mine in the country. My question was, so coal mining's been kind of big in Alabama. About how many mines are there fewer mines now than there used to be? About how many mines were there at the peak back when you were talking about?
Oh my gosh, there were hundreds. I don't have a number for the mines, but there were hundreds of mines. I mean, small mines, big, Coalburg. I mean, I've got a map when I do my Sloss Furnaces and the rise of the Birmingham district of all the mines, and there were hundreds of them. Now they're more consolidated. Drummond is still around, but just not near what you used to have. Also, but it is, and when I do that presentation on mining, the dangers are still just like they were, centuries ago. But I really don't know any figures on mining. Ask me a question about Sloss. I can.
Question: This a lot of this is 12-bar blues, and I've always heard and thought that that was a creation from northern Mississippi, the 12-bar blues.
It was.
Did it grow up in Birmingham independently of that, or was that a traditional style? Did they get it from the people in Mississippi, or were they independent of it?
Actually, W.C. Handy out of Florence was the one that went into the delta of Mississippi and first put together the 12-bar. And so he was from Alabama, the Florence area, but he got everything, and he was somebody who could remember. He could go into Mississippi, and we're not talking recording anybody, but he could remember everything, and he's the one I've always read that came up with the 12-bar blue. W.C. Handy.
Do we have any more questions?
What is yas yas? Do you know what that is?
I think it's not a very nice term. I'll tell you later.
Okay.
There's children here, so. Now, a clean question that I can answer. Well, if there's not anything, guys, thank you so much for letting me share this music with you through the technical difficulty as well. And again, you can find a lot of this online, and again, I'm just glad to bring the book back. But you can't take the book, so make sure you... Evidently, what happened was, when they put this book together, Sony Music obtained some of the music illegally, and so when they found out Sloss was going to sell this, they threatened to sue him if they sold it. So when I donated to libraries and teachers and stuff like that, but that's why we had so many left over, because they pulled it because of the, music is a funny thing. Copyright issues are a funny thing. But
well, they have no case if you don't sell them.
Well, and people will say, I really would like to donate, $20 to the Sloss Furnaces, and I'll go, well, thank you. I'll give you this book for donating. That's how that's how we get around it, which is ridiculous. I'm sure nobody cares, but still.